Get your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.
A standalone macro is a program you create in a visual environment that runs a series of actions in a specified order. As opposed to embedded macros, standalone macros appear as separate objects under the macros category within the navigation pane in your database. Macros perform the tasks required by users to use the database. For example, a standalone access macro could check which value a user has selected in a form field, and then open a corresponding report based on the value of that field. When you write macros, you need to know both the actions, what to do for each step in the macro, as well as the arguments, which are additional settings that specify exactly what you want each action to do. To make macro creation easier, Access comes with a macro design window. To create a new macro in the macro design window, click the macro button that appears in the Macros and Code button group on the Create tab in the ribbon. This will open the macro design window and also display the design tab of the Macro Tools contextual tab within the ribbon. Next, select the actions the macro will perform when it is executed. You can select the first action from the drop-down that appears within the macro design window. After selecting the action, you need to enter the action's arguments. These action arguments are the additional settings that the selected action needs to be evaluated or to function. Enter the arguments into the fields shown within the action. Depending on the type of macro you are creating, the arguments will vary considerably. Some actions simply need you to define more arguments than others. Many have default arguments you can change as needed. Some arguments have no default value but require you to enter an expression instead. Also, some arguments are required in order for an action to work. For example, if you select the Open Form action, then you must specify the name of the form to open. If you hold your mouse pointer over one of the fields shown in the action arguments, Access displays help about the currently selected argument in a tooltip. You can click the Tell Me More link in this tooltip to show the associated help file for the action or argument. This makes entering the actions and arguments much easier by telling you what information is required and showing you examples. You can remove an action from a macro by simply clicking the Delete button, which looks like a small X, in the upper right corner of the selected action. To complete your macro, you continue simply selecting actions within the macro from the Add New Action drop-down that appears below your current action and specifying the arguments your action requires. After you have finished selecting all the actions and arguments needed for the macro, you should save it so you can run it in the future when needed. You can do this by clicking the Save button in the Quick Access toolbar. Enter the name for the macro into the macro name field in the Save As dialog box. Give it a name that will help you remember its function within the database. Then click the OK button in the Save As dialog box. One way to run a macro is to right-click the name of any macro that's shown in the navigation pane, and then click the Run command in the pop-up menu that appears. You can also double-click the name of a macro shown in the navigation pane to run it as well. Another way to run macros is to open them in Design View, and then click the Run button in the Tools button group on the Design tab of the Macro Tools contextual tab within the ribbon. To edit a macro, you can simply right-click the name of the macro to edit in the navigation pane and then select the Design View command in the pop-up menu that appears to display the design view of the macro. Here you can change the macro's arguments and actions as needed, and then save it again. After you've created the macro and ensured it works the way you want it to work, you can then add the macro to a command button's onClick event within a form. This lets the users of the form click the command button to execute the macro when using the database in the future.
Like what you see? Pick up your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.